You know, I always look forward to reviewing a Soundcore item because it's always so well presented. From the top-notch packaging and presentation with, albeit slight overuse of plastics for this day and age, to the presentation of the earbuds in the case themselves. Everything is an experience. Now, the build quality is also fairly top-notch. I mean, the use of plastics both in the earbud and the case, they're a little bit on the thinner side for this price in my opinion, but the quality of the finish is fantastic. Now the case itself is pretty pocketable. Although it is on the larger and thicker side, it's pocketable because the edges are all tapered. Although being a square means that all the sides feel exactly the same in the hand, which means on many occasions when I was reaching for it in my pocket, I found myself trying to open it the wrong way, and the lid does feel a little bit flimsy on its hinge, so you might end up damaging it. Just be careful of that. If you've got the logo the right side up, then you'll be just fine. Inside you've got this little LED, which is a nice glowy affair to tell you how much battery charge there's left, and there's two lovely little LEDs that light up the earbuds themselves. I know it's inconsequential, but it just looks so great every time I open it. Now the earbuds themselves are the now ubiquitous stem style design. I've got to say, these are very comfortable in the ear. I love the fact that the stem isn't too long like certain other earbuds, but in the ear they almost disappear, which is the sign of a well-made product. This is just well executed, right down to the details around the nozzle and the finishing. It's got this bifurcated nozzle, that's interesting. And the coolest thing about the earbuds though, for me, is the fact that each of them have a little notch, one on either earbud, that actually are your touch controls. Actually, they're squeeze controls, much like the AirPods Pro. Unlike the AirPods Pro though, they don't have any haptic feedback. Instead, they make this little clicking noise inside the earbud, so you can hear it. And honestly, the effect was so convincing, I had to check a couple of times to see if they weren't actually tiny little buttons, because they felt like that even without haptic feedback. Basically, well executed. Which brings us to features and controls. Where do I start? This thing has in-ear detection, wireless charging, LDAC support, multi-point support, a heart rate sensor, customizable EQ, customizable in more than one way by the way, 3 different levels of ANC, 2 different levels of transparency mode, and a couple of other features that I'm forgetting at the moment. But honestly, even if half these features didn't work, to say that this is not feature packed would be an injustice. Of course, none of them actually work. Well, barring a few, they don't actually work unless you've got the accompanying app, and the app doesn't work unless you make an account. And the worst part is, even if you do make an account, if you go right down to the last tab on the home screen of the app, the wellness part where the heart rate sensor and all the other wellness things lie, you've got to log in again. It's bad enough that they take your $129 or so and don't give you all the features unless you agree to make an account and give them your data. It's even worse that they put another wall behind a certain subset of features. It's just weird to me. It just seems like you need to sell your soul for complete control. You know what you don't need to sell your soul for? Subscribing to this channel right there. It's free too. Okay, now with respect to all the features, there's 2 key themes that stood out to me. Obviously, it's feature packed, but what's important was the sheer level of customizability the Liberty 4 affords you and the attention to detail throughout the product. For example, customizability wise, you've got 3 different ways to change the sound signature of the product. You've got 3 different levels of active noise cancellation. Those touch controls I told you about, they're single squeeze, double squeeze, and triple squeeze, but you can assign each one of them on either earbud to anything you want. Full customization. I don't know why other earbuds don't offer this, but you get this on the Liberty 4, and that's fantastic. The only thing I did miss was the lack of swipe up and down for volume, which you get on the AirPods Pro. I think that's quite a nice little gesture. Maybe they could have incorporated that, but I guess budgetary constraints are at play. Now, what you can also do though is adjust the level of firmness that you need to squeeze the controls with. Although why you would use anything more than the lowest level of firmness, I don't know. Life is hard enough as it is. Why are you making things harder for yourself? Same thing goes for active noise cancellation. Then you've got wind noise reduction. You can even turn on or off the auto play and pause based on your in-ear detection. But then you'd have to realize that there's a lot of attention to detail here. For example, the auto play and pause thing, the in-ear detection, like any other earbud, if you take it out of your ear, a single earbud, it'll pause your music. If you put it back in, it'll play it again. But if you take both the earbuds out, it actually stops the music altogether. If you've got it lying on the table, you pick it up and you put it in your ear, That's all you need to do to answer a phone call. That little extra thing where taking both earbuds out stops your music, it's just an extra level of functionality I haven't seen. Or take for instance the case itself. There's this little LED that's currently glowing red too. You can't see that, but it shows me that there's low battery. But that LED they could have just stuck on there, but they didn't. They made sure the LED only glows at the bottom, and they made sure it glows a certain way rather than just turns on. That's attention to detail. Even the packaging, right? It comes with 4 different types of ear tips: small, medium 1, medium 2 and large. And medium 2 is basically the same as medium 1, but it goes a little bit deeper in your ear, just for that extra seal should someone want it. It's just that little level of extra detail that you find throughout the experience here that honestly I haven't found in a lot of other earbuds, and I appreciate that. I really do. Now, once you've logged in, the first thing you want to do, well, one of 2 things really. One, you can either go to sound quality and activate LDAC. No connection dropouts, smooth connection throughout. I had no issues whatsoever. Or you can go to the settings cog on the top right and activate multi-point. It's called dual connection because you can connect to up to 2 devices at the same time. But thankfully, unlike certain other IEMs, Samsung, what? Those devices don't need to be in any ecosystem. You can connect to any 2 devices and it'll remember them and it'll switch between them. It works a treat. Interesting point, when you activate them, takes about 10 seconds to activate. When you activate the multi-point, it shows you a list of previously connected devices, which it showed me. Brand new, out of the box. I'd never connected to anything. This is a sealed box from Amazon I bought with my own money. I can only assume that these devices, which had some people's names on them, presumably these people, I hope, worked at Soundcore for quality control and they were checking the device. Dan, if you're out there, it works. Everything works fine. Thank you. There's a few other features to talk about. You can update the firmware, you can set it to automatically power off after 5 or 10 or 15 minutes of idle time, and you can check the fit in your ear, which I think is pretty important. A good seal will help active noise cancellation as well as sound quality, so it might be worth your time doing that. On the home screen, it's all to do with sound quality. You've got ANC, transparency mode, all that we'll talk about in the next section because we're going to do a deep dive. Yeah, this is going to be the most detailed sound quality section you'll see on YouTube about the Liberty 4. Yeah, but first, let's talk about the Soundcore wellness bit. This bit, which has the heart rate sensor, also it tells you your stress level and your posture. It does not have accelerometers, so while you can do exercises with this and it will monitor your heart rate and it'll log your heart rate so it can give you your statistics later, it won't actually monitor your run. It has no access to GPS controls or anything like that, but it does log your stats. In my testing, the heart rate results were pretty much identical to my Galaxy Watch 4, so it's at least as accurate as all your other smart devices. That's pretty cool because if you got your phone and if you've got this, then you don't need to buy a smartwatch. It does everything. The only thing I wish it also did was sync up your heart rate to certain other apps like Strava or Runkeeper, so you can sort of sync up your run with your GPS route along with your heart rate and just have a whole picture. To my knowledge, you can't do that, unfortunately. There's also an assistant that lives in the earbud that actually helps you do exercises. You can actually pick an exercise from the preset or you can make your custom one and she'll tell you, start walking now, and then it'll monitor your heart rate. When your heart rate reaches a certain amount, it'll say start running now, and so on and so forth. It's pretty cool. Honestly, it works as advertised. It's pretty accurate for heart rate monitoring. I mean, it's more than I've seen in a earbud before, so hats off to them. One side note, once you get the heart rate sensor working, it works all the time continuously, which can eat into your battery. So what you want to do is go to the top right here, go down to privacy down here, and just turn off your heart rate sensor. You can always turn it on before a workout if you wanted to. Which brings us to sound quality. We'll talk about active noise cancellation, we'll talk about transparency, and we'll talk about sound quality of actual music and movies and whatnot, along with the microphone quality. And before I start, if you're a fanboy, or if you're here because you want to hear good things about this, you might want to click away. That's just not how we do it here. There's good and bad. I'm just going to lay it all down like it is. So, without further ado, active noise cancellation. There's 3 modes: strong, medium, and weak. I measured the strong performance. I'm going to put a graph up. You see that line up there? That's the noise signal. That's the noise signal I generate. And then what I do is I get a speaker to play that noise and I record it through these to see how much it actually attenuates. This is how well the Liberty 4 did. Remember, lower is better on this graph. You can see this section here, that's the bass, and it attenuates a lot of bass frequencies, which means if you have a lot of bassier frequencies in your environment, it'll cancel out a lot of that. It really does. but it doesn't do very much in the mids and the highs. And you might say, how much is very much? Well, let's compare it. This is the Sony LinkBuds S, something that's sort of in the ballpark price-wise. You can see it does a lot better. It's just generally lower in most frequencies. Therefore, in traffic noise and for, people talking in a cafe, the LinkBuds is going to serve you better. But that's not what's really important. Here is the performance of the Soundpeats Mini Pro HS, something that's about half the price of the Liberty 4. And you can see it's just better. It's lower almost throughout the frequency range. Yeah. Oh, here's another one, the JBL Tune 230NC, another sub $70, sometimes sub $50 earbud. That does a lot better. Yeah, it's just the market we're living in. At the same price, you're getting better performance from something like the Sony LinkBuds S. At a lower price, half its price, you're still getting better performance from the JBL as well as the Soundpeats. It's not that this is bad. It makes a noticeable difference in certain environments, but it doesn't do much for a lot of environments with mid and high frequency noises. And we're in a competitive market where there are better things for half the money. What can I say? And that's the strongest setting on AMC, by the way. Which brings us to transparency mode. Again, reference signal. Now what we want to see is a earbud that basically reproduces that reference signal almost identically. Basically, the noise coming in is being transmitted to you unchanged, therefore sounds natural. AirPods Pro do that. The new Bose QC2 does a wondrous job of that as well. These do not. As you can see, it attenuates the bass, it attenuates the highs, and it actually amplifies the mids. To be fair, it's not necessarily a transparency mode as much as it is in ambient sound mode, and it's a flavor of ambient sound, but in certain situations where you've got loud sounds outside, this can get uncomfortable. It also has a vocal mode, and thankfully it doesn't boost the voices there because that's already quite boosted. It actually attenuates the bass a little bit so you can hear voices a little bit better. So it's fine, it works, but overall I'd say this is not the best active noise cancellation, nor is this the best transparency mode as indicated by the measurements and by my subjective experience as well. Now, if you feel like you've enjoyed this review or it's been of actual use to you, what with the objectivity and the subjectivity, then maybe consider hitting that subscribe button or joining our YouTube membership or Patreon. It's only $1 a month, and if you do it before the 1st of April, you're eligible for a giveaway. Just saying, that's it. Think about it. Thanks. Which brings us to actual sound quality. How does it actually sound? Whew. This is going to anger. The comment section is going to be on fire. Remember, I'm not telling you what to like. If you already like this, you like it. Who cares what I have to say? But I will say this. This is an example of objective garbage. This is just bad. This is so bad. But I'll explain. Here's the frequency response, and if you haven't seen one of these before, okay, 15-second primer, just 15 seconds. It's very simple. You've got the frequencies 20 Hz to 20 kilohertz. Bass over here, highs over there, mids in the middle. There's a squiggly line. The squiggly line, if it's up, then it means that part of the frequency is increased in volume, is more prominent. So as you can see, the bass elevated because it's bass boosted. Makes sense, right? Problem is, when you've got that much of a bass boost, usually it's considered good practice to cut that boost by about 200 to 300 Hz. The reason why you do that is so the bass doesn't bleed into the mids and it doesn't make the mids, so vocals, guitars, all that sort of instruments, sound muddy. That's exactly what happens here. You've got a lot of bass and it's uncontrolled and it goes straight into the mids. If you're listening to heavy genres of music, this comes through pretty obviously. It's very muddy, it's very unclear. It's not good. But let's put that aside for a second. My issue is with the other side of the graph. You see this little hump here? That's supposed to be there. It's meant to be there because in-ear monitors bypass your ear and put sound directly into your ear canal. So it has to kind of mimic the effect of this part of the ear, which is basically that hump. That's all I'm going to say. That's a whole rabbit hole of how that hump should be and so on. Not getting into that. The problem is, you see that peak? Right after the peak, there's a trough. That trough is in the frequency range of a lot of female vocalists. Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus on certain songs, depending on what pitches she's hitting. It sounds awful. Partly because it's recessed, so female vocals sound noticeably lower in the mix, and then you've got a peak right after, so it sounds uneven, and then as you go off into the treble, you've got these two massive peaks, which is just, there's nothing wrong with having more treble. That's a flavor. You can have a more treble forward presentation, but there's a way to do it. It's got to be linear. It's got to be even. This is nothing like that. So what you have is really weird mids, right? Where if you've got a male and a female vocal, for example, one sounds more forward, one sounds further behind, which gives you a sense of space, which you might have heard on certain YouTube reviews. This is true. It does have a sense of space, partly because of that unevenness, partly because of that treble, but it's unnatural. It just doesn't sound right. And if you listen to good tuning, you'll realize, oh, that's not what that song is supposed to sound like at all, not even close. Because of which a lot of female vocals sound like they're way lower in the mix. It's just bad. And the thing is, the female vocalist can hit multiple ranges, so different parts of her voice end up sounding at different levels. It's really weird. It's just not good. And those treble spikes are just unforgivable because they're really, really harsh. Now there's more, and I'm gonna get into all of that, but this is an example of objectively bad frequency response, just bad sound. Again, if you enjoy it, I'm not telling you not to enjoy it, but I am saying consider two things. One, EQ, we'll get to that in a second, and two, there are other IEMs out there with much better frequency response, much nicer tuning, much smoother tuning. You might want to try those out with your favorite genres for a while and then come back to these and see if you still like them. And if you do, who am I to say otherwise, am I right? Which brings us to the important question, can this be fixed with EQ? And the answer is not really. So you have a custom EQ, which looks like a very complicated pro thing. It's not once you start messing around with it a bit, but it doesn't have the sliders required to actually tame what needs to be tamed. Like that 8 kilohertz and that 14 kilohertz boost that you see, it's just you can't tame them because those sliders are not there. The only thing you can do is, like me, pull it all down. Pull the whole treble down so that the spike, when it happens, and it still happens, it just doesn't exceed a certain volume level, so it's more tolerable. I have tried to EQ it to the best of my ability and to give a couple of different flavors which I believe are more even and more natural sounding, and I'll share that in Discord, link in the description below. Join the Discord, we can talk about it and you can mess around with the EQ. You can get better sound out of this, but you can't fix all the issues, unfortunately. There's a lot of bass. It's a lot of fun for bass. After you clean it up with EQ, the bass becomes really fun and the mids become more tolerable, but there's high frequency spikes. I just can't get rid of those, not with the custom EQ. Third-party apps are probably a good way to go. Which brings us to another option, which is Hear ID. And the way it works is it gives you a song sample and then it gives you two different styles and says, which one do you like? And then it does it 10 times over. The problem is twofold. Number one, the song sample is over 40 or 50 seconds long, and most people are just going to choose which one they like in the first 5-10 seconds and just move on and quickly go through Hear ID. The problem is that will not give you the good results you want, because some of the styles they put forward to you are only applicable to one part of that song sample that's 40 seconds in. So you've got to hear the whole thing, which means this whole test will take well over 10 minutes, which most people, I'm guessing, don't have the patience for. And in fact, even if you did, you have to hear the whole song and you have to know what you're listening for, and you have to hear both samples back and forth and then choose and then do the whole thing and then maybe redo the whole thing once you kind of learn how it works. It's ironic because it's meant to be easier than the custom pro EQ thing, but it actually ends up being more time consuming and I think a lot harder for a lot of people who are not sure what to listen for. Honestly, a third-party EQ is best. Oh, and it also has a bunch of EQ options, presets. The frequency response I showed you was for the signature EQ, and all the other EQs, they don't really solve the problems. They just make everything worse. You're better off with the custom EQ, honestly. We've talked about ANC, we've talked about transparency, we talked about frequency response. That leaves us with microphone quality. This is a microphone quality check, and I am literally in the middle of traffic. You know what the cool thing about traffic is? If the microphones aren't doing a good job, then you can't hear any of this. It's almost like poetic justice. So let's talk about battery life while I'm doing that. They say it'll go up to 9 hours, but realistically, you'll get about 6.5 hours with active noise cancellation on. With LDAC on, you'll get about 4 hours actually. But still, 15 minutes of charge back in the case gives you between 2 and 3 hours of actual playtime, and that's pretty good. Plus, wireless charging in the case, and I actually have no issues with the battery life. The real question is, how did the microphone do? Does my voice sound digitized? Was the noise cancelled effectively? You tell me. Okay, so in conclusion, what do we have here? Well, in my opinion and my testing, we have a Bluetooth earbud that is, on the one hand, beautifully presented, generally pretty well constructed, very well finished, very well manufactured. It's got the level of customization that I wish all earbuds have, and a feature set that honestly, earbuds wish they had. Also, it's got a level of attention to detail that you just don't find on a lot of Bluetooth earbuds. Not even more expensive ones, if I'm being honest. And I love all of that. Truly a pleasure. That combined with the relative comfort of the case, but the undeniable comfort of the earbuds in the ear, it's a fantastic experience. Unfortunately, it doesn't do quite as well for sound. The ANC is demonstrably not as good as the competitors in the market, nor is it as good as things half the price. Although that could be enough for you, it's not saying no. The transparency mode is also not objectively great, but maybe it'll just do the job. The sound quality is just objectively bad, and you could do much better than this with wired IEMs that are just $20, wireless IEMs that are, $60-70. The JBL, brilliantly tuned. So I guess what we've got is a fantastic tech product that doesn't do very well when it comes to sound. But these are earbuds, which is ironic to say the least. So what do you think? Would you still buy it just for the features, or is audio more important to you, or will you just fix the audio with external EQ and call it a day? You still get a good IEM. Tell me in the comments section. I'll see you there, and I will also see you in the next one. Till next time, stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.